Yeah. The top charts got hot garbage and high demand. There's good karma and honest artists of contraband. Conscious man are greeted like Congress treated.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Vivienne Benesch, producing artistic director of PlayMakers Repertory Company, and welcome to this, our 7th episode of Virtually Viv. In this series, I sit down virtually with esteemed theater artists from around the Triangle and around the nation to engage in conversations with truly amazing people about our stories, past, present, and into the future. Just a few housekeeping notes before we get started. For those of you joining Virtually Viv for the first time this week, there is a special treat in getting to experience it live via Zoom. Although you won't be able to speak directly to us, the chat button at the bottom of your screen is a great tool to write in any questions you might have. You can do this at any point during our conversation. Promise it won't interrupt us. And we will be keeping an eye on the chat to pass on your questions. We've also added the option to watch on Facebook, but unfortunately only Zoom participants have the ability to ask questions at the Q&A for the moment. We're working on that. So Facebookers, make sure to register and join us on Zoom for the next Virtually Viv. 2 weeks ago, we announced our 45th season, All Too Human, an exciting collection of virtual experiences that will allow us to continue bringing quality storytelling right into your living rooms. And tonight, we are so thrilled to welcome one of the very amazing humans at the center of our first show. He is an international touring spoken word poet and hip hop artist, educator, and National Poetry Slam finalist. He was the co-founder and former artistic director of Sacrificial Poets here in the Triangle, and is now the associate director and artist alumnus of Next Level, a cultural diplomacy program that sends American hip hop artists around the world to use music and dance in promoting cultural exchange, artistic collaboration, and community building. He's performed, taught, and managed programs with youth and adults of all ages across the US and abroad on 5 continents. He's been a keynote speaker at various conferences, a TEDx presenter, and as a performing artist, he has released multiple albums featuring his poetry, rap, and hip hop music. Most recently, releasing a new album in 2020, yes, that's right, this year, 2020, called Collard Green Music. His one-man show, Temples of Lung and Air, premiered here at PlayMakers in 2018 in collaboration with Street Sign Productions, and went on then to Detroit Public Theater and to the United Solo Theater Festival in New York. A virtual encore presentation of Temples of Lung and Air launches our new PlayMakers season, beginning September 28th and running for just 2 weeks through October 11th. I hope you'll all get a chance to see it there for the first or the 30th time. But now it is my huge honor. Please help me in welcoming writer, performer, UNC alum, and Durham native, Kane Smego.
Thank you so much.
Hello.
Hello, hello.
Hi. Oh, it's so nice to see you. And I know we have to start with the fact that you did the red eye from California last night.
I did. Made the trek, mask on for, 12 hours nonstop through all the travel and layovers, and yeah, made it back in one piece, luckily.
Well, I'm glad you're back on your home turf here, although I know you call LA home as well. Now, not the same thing.
Not the same as my roots here, for sure.
But I guess I do have to ask, there's some, I usually always start by asking, like, so what has this past 6 months been like for you? But to add to everything else, the fires on the West Coast and how that is, I mean, the compilation just, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. I think, I can't complain. I know there's a lot of folks that are dealing with a lot more. And I've been lucky enough to, I kind of was needing a break from the road. I would never have wished this upon the world or on anyone. But I was kind of traveling nonstop through the work that I do with international hip hop and music exchange programs, and got back at the end of February from a program that we ran in collaboration with a community of artists down in Peru, and got back and was supposed to go actually run another program 10 days later in Bolivia. And then I actually got sick. We weren't sure, of course, at that time if it was COVID or a bad cold or what. And so we thought it best to just, stay put. And the program ended up getting canceled after the first week. March 12th was the end of that first week, which was when, everything kind of went crazy on this end. So it has been the longest amount of time that I've been in one place and been in Los Angeles since I moved there 6 years ago. So it is, unfortunate circumstances, but has at least given me a chance to just kind of sit and reflect and rekindle some relationships, some friendships, and some contacts, ironically through the digital kind of realm. But yeah, I'm hanging in like everybody else, trying to find creative ways as artists to find work and share resources and all that kind of stuff.
So that makes me want to ask you two questions, which is, first, has this been a creative time for you? Have you been, or has it gone in and out, or like?
It's funny. A lot of my close friends who are artists who, some of them who are, full-time into music or full-time into theater, where I have always kind of straddled the two worlds, many worlds of like poetry and hip hop music performance, and then teaching, and then now running the program with Next Level that I'm an alumnus of. As the associate director, I'm more kind of curating and managing programs for other artists. But so a lot of those folks who are always in it, nonstop. I think for this was a moment where they were like, "Ooh, I'm not inspired. I need to take a break from that." For me, it was kind of the opposite. I was home all of a sudden and like didn't know what to do with myself, and was really excited on the one hand to have some time to actually finish up some of these projects, the album being one of them, which was like, 2 years plus in the making, and had taken a back burner to the work of theater, to the show, and to some of these projects. So for me, yeah, it was a creative time for sure. I tried to create as much discipline as I could. I think I joke with people like the last month or so, I think I've slowed down a lot. And I've been trying to be okay with that while also trying to stay on the hustle. But I came out the gate those first few months hungry to be creating, and luckily are connected. I mean, I'm really connected to a network of artists around the world who were searching for ways to deal with the moment and respond. And so, some of the stuff from my album, the last 2 or 3 songs were like artists that I was knowing through these international collaborations that sent me beats like, "Hey, here's an instrumental, let's make a song." And so it's been a very creative time for sure.
Good. So for many people on this call may not know sort of your journey and history. Can you take a little tour? How did this sort of journey from Sacrificial Poets and your work here, even at UNC, starting, how did it sort of evolve? And then how did this sort of activism, was it always a part of it? Did it grow? And sort of give us a journey.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's been multiple journeys within journeys. Even before I went to college, I was working for 2 years, and I spent a summer living in Cochabamba, Bolivia, with the grandmother of a close friend of mine from high school, and I became fluent in Spanish, and that opened up a whole new world. And when I started going to UNC, my major was Romance languages with Spanish, and my idea was to do the master's in teaching program when I graduated, do one more year at UNC for English as a second language learning. And my junior year, it just so happened that life stepped in, and that the master's program was canceled, and we had a lot of things that were growing in the work that we were doing with poetry and hip hop and outreach with Sacrificial Poets. It had always been something kind of, for me growing up, that I was always into, tapped into the culture, and but it was always fun. I considered it, something that was fun and entertainment, and to hang out with my friends. And I think through all the relationships that I built with Sacrificial Poets and the mentors that I had, Dasana Hanu, my old high school teacher, Michael Irwin, getting to go off to different competitions and meet other young people around that same time, it started to make me realize, oh, like this, there's a deeper element to this that has really helped transform my life in the way that I engage with words and art and community. And we started experimenting with those same mentors, opening up spaces for us to experiment with youth in teaching. And so those two things coincided. And then it was like, all right, I graduated. What do I do? And you know, I worked a side job, worked a little bit at Vimela's Curry Blossom Cafe, another, you know, local gem. And while I was working with CJ Sood and Will McInerney and some other great folks trying to figure out how to make this thing work, and was lucky enough to pick up enough tools to be able to teach and tour and travel and make it work.
That international part and your connection to Next Level, how did that come about? And can you tell us a little bit more about the work that you do there?
Yeah, so actually when I moved out to LA in 2014, Pierce Freelon, who was involved in collaborating with Mark Katz on an Apple Juice Kid on kind of like the prototype to Next Level, which was called the Beat Making Lab, which started as a collaboration with them teaching a beat making class, making hip hop instrumental beats with software and hardware on UNC campus for students as a course. And then they got funding to go and ended up getting more funding through PBS to do a web series to go and do collaborations with communities around the world, train them on how to use the equipment, leave the equipment at the end to create a sustainable beat making lab. And they inevitably met, you know, rappers and dancers and graffiti artists and so there was this grant that was Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs. The U.S. government has a grant through that bureau for international exchange programs like this. And they said, wait, why don't we expand it into all the elements of hip hop, and received it. And so as I was getting ready to make this shift, they said, hey, there's this new program that got funded. Actually was, you know, UNC was one of the sponsors. You should apply. So I applied and was lucky enough to get selected to teach rap and songwriting that first year. I went to Zimbabwe, which I mentioned in the show. Is one of the pieces in the one-man show. And that was a really transformative moment for me. And I was lucky enough to be able to stay on and start working as a site manager, kind of curating and building future programs, because the Next Level works with 5, 6, or 7 countries every year, and 4 different U.S. artists representing those different elements go to the country for 2.5 weeks to do collaborations. So I started working, kind of managing those, and now it's, you know, we're in the 7th season, and 35 countries and a lot of alumni around the country and around the world. So that's kind of been the journey.
Wow. So I want to get to Temples of Air because, of course, it's going to be showing soon. But in leading up to that, like, talk about sort of music performer, sort of that. I mean, Temples of Air in a lot of ways was your first play that you wrote, right? Like, I'm curious why a play suddenly? Why that? Like, I'd love to hear that.
I guess technically it was my second. I wrote a play in college that was commissioned by this group that was Criminal Justice Action and Awareness on campus. And we did some outreach workshops. CJ was involved as well, and some other folks on campus doing outreach to the Durham Youth Home, which is a high security juvenile detention center in Durham, doing poetry and hip hop workshops there. And then they commissioned me to write a play using actors on campus and some from the community from Durham and Chapel Hill to share kind of stories and perspectives from that. But that was still, you know, that was like me just kind of dabbling. So this show really happened, you know, from all these years of performing and making connections and seeing different ways that the lines get blurred between poetry and hip hop and storytelling and theater. And I met Joseph Meagle and Elizabeth Lewis Corley, and at a time when another artist who also blends these type of things named Mark Bamuthi Joseph, who's kind of a legend in this world of hip hop theater. And we opened up with a few poems for him when he came to UNC, and that's how I met Joseph. And a few years later, we did a program called Poetic Portraits of a Revolution, where we got to spend 2 months, myself and a few other artists in Egypt and Tunisia during the popular uprisings there, collecting oral histories and videos and turning it into a piece, a 2-person show that we did. And Joseph said when I moved to Cali, he said, whenever you write your one-man show, I'll direct it. And I was like, one-man show? Like, I don't even know how to go about that. But that planted the seed, and I think it, was a couple more years where a few different experiences, Next Level being one of them, the passing of my father being kind of at the other end of that extreme of kind of, galvanizing situations that made me feel like, okay, I'm ready to try my hand at telling this story. And yeah, we workshopped it a lot and got a lot of input and a lot of iterations, and it's still workshopping and transforming, of course.
I love that. I mean, developed at the Process series here at UNC, and then having its premiere at PlayMakers. And it was a giant success here for so many reasons, primarily because of your brilliance, both as a performer and as a writer in this. And I think it really struck a lot of nerves at the time. It spoke to so many people. But one of the things that for me as a producer was so interesting was it really reached people who might never have chosen to go see a hip hop show, right? To program it at a large regional theater where especially our subscribers. So I remember getting a letter about it saying, thank you so much. If I hadn't been a subscriber, I would probably never have seen this. Mm-hmm. And that isn't a plug for subscribing or PlayMakers Pass, though I'll let that happen. But more that your ability to reach across generations, across cultures, across race, it's such important work. And really, since the years you've been working on Temples, and in 2018 when you did it, to today, it's only for me become more and more relevant and important in that way. So I'm curious for you, the performer, what is that evolution? I know it's also incredibly personal, right? Yeah. It's your story.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think for me, it's kind of the ironic thing, like the audiences that I think I are most likely to be interested in a show just off paper, and who are probably like will give the most energy or the most familiar with like what it is to be in a hip hop show or a poetry show, make it really fun to perform for. But those aren't the ones that I necessarily feel a responsibility as a white man, and especially a white man that has been kind of raised and influenced by the culture of hip hop that comes from Black communities. Is not necessarily the audience that I feel responsible to reach. Those happen to be like, okay, my friends, my good folks that do this same work, but I feel a lot of responsibility to reach the folks that look like my family, and that look like a lot of the characters. Of course, there are a lot of different characters, diverse characters in the show, but a lot of it is autobiographical about my family and about the nuances and the difficulties of family and having difficult conversations, and the way that people can both be great mentors and loving, caring parents and grandparents and relatives, and also can be, unfortunately, the folks that socialize us to learn some of the darker sides of our past beliefs and behaviors. And so finding ways to honor those legacies of the positive things we learn from them, but also be able to take the baton forward and move past those things that we realize are not best for humankind. And so for me, I really loved getting to work with you all, and knowing from the beginning that a lot of the folks that would come to the show might not have ever been to a hip hop show or to a spoken word poetry show or know much about it. But I feel really lucky and really responsible to stand on the shoulders of so many folks, especially people of color, folks from the Black community who have, mentored me along the way to be able to share this story and to challenge folks to think about these things critically, and to have these kind of conversations with themselves and with their family members and with their community members.
Yeah. So we have a clip that, do you want to set it up for us? Because a lot of people are going to get super excited.
Sure. It's always that thing, right? Where it's like, it's like, you know, how do you don't want to give the full disclaimer that, like, you know, gives it away, or like these days it seems like when you watch a trailer to a movie, they like give all the best parts away already, right? So I won't do that, but
there are too many great parts.
The show is about growing up between different worlds and being in different spaces, you know, and I feel like in a lot of ways I've been a bridge between places, and sometimes have not been able to be a bridge between places, but in this particular scene has to do with it's a kind of fusion of my experience growing up as a kid in Durham, moving to Chapel Hill in middle school and for a couple years in high school, and just the cultural kind of shock that I had moving from those places, and things that I hadn't even thought about myself and about the communities that I came up within, and also fusing that with the racial prerequisite cases, which are cases that started just after, you know, the inception of the United States, and as they were trying to decide who could or who could not be a naturalized citizen. And when we talk about, you know, being the race or the gender police, as we sometimes say, right? Folks that try to say, you should act like this because you look like this. This was about that in both the institutional formal way and in the way that we see this kind of socialized. So that's all I'll say. I won't give you any specific details, but
that's a great introduction. And we're gonna go away and let this video.
Oh yay, oh yay, oh yay. In 1878, stop acting black. The district court has decided, stop acting black, Kane. Chinese people, you're not black, Kane, are not Kane. In 1889, Kane, you're not black. The circuit court has decided, don't you know your Hawaiians are not Wigger? And the court has decided Mexicans are Wigger. And the Supreme Court of the United States of America has decided Japanese people are not polished porcelain, wedding gowns, and a horse with wings, moonlight, and a dorsal fin, horrid grin of a great shark, all the hue of a fake god, all of you is a lie, all of this is a lie. Yo, what up, gangster? Kane, you are, right? Why you talk black? And the court said, Asian Indians are not. Asian Indians are like you, Kane, are not black. The court said Syrians are like you in 1910, like you, Kane. The court says Syrians are not like you in 1913, are not like you, Kane. They're not like you, Kane. Filipinos are not. Arabs are not. Koreans are not, Burmese are not, Afghanis are not, Native Americans are not like you, Kane. Burley is not like you, Kane. Burley is not like you, Kane. Stop acting black, you wigger, say the kids whose skin is, you're not black, they say, not like Burley or Sergio or Devin or Demetrius, not at all like, not at all. You are lightning, washed as a flag of surrender, surrender to this lie, great hope, false hope, hope.
There's the piece.
Again, I just love the piece. And for those of you who don't know about Temples of Langaneo yet, but you will when you watch it soon. Again, your ability, I love that you were a romance language major, because your sort of reverence for the power of communication through language, which I know is what spoken word and hip hop has as its center, but its connection to that, well, I guess I'm just incredibly moved by it, and I always have been, and I'm so excited that actually seeing it virtually as opposed to live still feels incredibly in the moment, and real and live, which is great. One of the things we did, Kane, when we did the show, and you know, we only got to do it for 6 performances over one long weekend. So now I'm thrilled to be able to share it with, you know, the world at large for 2 weeks. But every night, one of the things about only doing it 6 times is that we're able to do a post-show discussion and something called Pass the Mic. And I wanted to, we won't be able to do it on every performance because people will watch it at different times. But can you talk about why that was important for you when we did it in 2018 and why it's important to keep that going?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think both looking forward and looking backwards, you know, like I think what was cool is that we were able to have some folks who were mentors of mine, Dasana Churchwell, who ran Black Poetry Theater, which was a spoken word theater troupe. And Dasan was my coach on the nationally competing Durham Poetry Slam team at that time. So I remember doing poems to kind of open up for their shows, and their shows first showing me what was possible moving beyond a 3-minute poem or, you know, a poetry competition. Like what happens when you stretch these things out to tell stories. So it felt right to honor them, and since I wouldn't be here without them, and then to bring in Josephus, who is a fellow poet and educator, youth organizer from Greensboro, to bring the Gate City Youth Slam team and some of those young high school kids and recent graduates to, you know, honor those young voices, because I was also one of them. You know, I was 18, 19 years old when I first started doing poetry. I was in second grade when I first started writing rhymes. So it felt like a cool honoring those who came before and those who we shall pass the baton to, who hopefully will invent some whole new mind-blowing ways of blurring these lines moving forward.
Well, October 11th, which is the last date of your run,
Yes.
we are going to have a discussion with you for people to be able to ask questions of you, and a new version of Pass the Mic. So I'm very excited about
It's gonna
that.
be great. It's gonna be great. Yeah, I saw someone. Well, Diana was asking in the chat about any plans to bring some music or dance partners to PlayMakers. So CJ Suit, who actually did participate in one of the Pass the Mics last time on October 11th, CJ Suit, who is the first poet laureate of Chapel Hill. Shout out to that. And one of the co-founders of Sacrificial Poets, will be performing some new work, as well as Tarish Jagetto Pipkins, who is an incredible, I mean, he's a jack of all trades. He's a puppeteer, he's an MC, meaning he also raps. Now he works with green screen, he's doing digital stuff. But his bread and butter is puppeteering, puppet making, and puppeteering. Some folks may have seen him in a very famous music video by Pharrell Williams and Missy Elliott, where he was the puppeteer that was doing controlling the puppets in that video. He's received grants from the Jim Henson Foundation. He's been on the Steve Harvey Show. He's incredible, and he also is the mastermind behind all the cardboard instruments and puppets and masks in the music video from the title track to my new album, Collard Green Music.
Well, what a perfect segue here, because I want, before we show the clip of that, I wanted to just say, so talk about the album, like what's the theme? How have your sort of like the themes evolved?
I think the album is a great compliment to the show, because there are some similar threads, but I think it's much more playful. You know, hip hop, I say it in the show, like hip hop has always been, you know, rebel music and party music. And it came out of, you know, communities, mostly Black and brown communities in New York City. Of course, we can trace back, you know, the precursors to hip hop all over the world, but it came at a time where folks were trying to deal with upheaval, with gentrification, with you know, displacement in the Bronx, and they were doing that both by speaking directly to issues that were affecting them at that time, whether it was displacement, racism, redlining, or they were talking about celebration. They were making party tracks to share joy. And I think the album, because the show definitely has all that as well, has some comedy, has some lightness, but it was heavy for me. It was a challenging, very vulnerable piece for me to write. And so the album, I think, touches on the, you know, Southern sensibilities and the experience in the American South, definitely touches on issues of race, but it's also fun. It plays off of hip hop's tendency for braggadocio, for just trying to play with words and punchlines and all that kind of stuff. So Collard Green Music. And it also calls back, the front cover is a picture of me and Burley, who's a really important person in the show, one of my mentors growing up, him teaching me to cut and cook collard greens. So I'm actually cutting collard greens when I'm like 7 or something on the album cover. So I think in that way, it's very connected to the show.
That's awesome. Let's take a look at that clip.
I'm cooking you top rhyming, Bull City top rhyming. Drop another diamond, every single cipher rhyming. Yeah, every single cipher rhyming. Drop another diamond, every single cipher rhyming.
South Pickle, baby, collard green mule. New South Pickle, baby, collard green mule. New South Pickle, baby, collard green mule. Collard green mule, collard green mule. South Pickle, baby, collard green mule.
Just, I want to live in that world. Can I? It's like
Cardboard world.
oh my God. I've encouraged people to put questions into the chat now, but a question that I ask every single guest is at the center of Playmakers' mission statement is our belief that theater can create a transformative impact. And this idea of transformation is particularly important to us right now. And so I'm curious, what does transformation mean to you? How does that idea resonate for you right now?
Wow, yeah, it's a big question. Transformation. Yeah, I think it goes back to finding what we pull from the past and how we move forward. You know, what will we look like? There's a mentor of mine that used to always say, it's kind of like a morbid thought, but I always actually get some weird comfort from it, that they say, like, in 100 years, most likely, definitely in 130 years, everyone that we know now on Earth will no longer be living. It'll literally be a new world, an entire new collective of humanity. And while that is like kind of a scary thing for us in this feeling of like life is so ephemeral and, oh, we're going to be gone, I think it's comforting to me in knowing that we do have the ability to transform pretty quickly between generations, depending on what we're able to pass forward as our legacies and what the next generation is able to change from our mistakes. And so, yeah, I think the show for me is a conversation with myself first, asking what are the things that I have inherited, what are the things that I've learned that are great, and what are the things that I need to dismantle in myself that really take work and time and effort and focus, and what are my blind spots, right? Because, you know, I talk about my grandparents in the show, and I'm critical of my grandparents in their approach to race and their blind spots around race, but they were also rebels in their own way in their time. My grandfather was Catholic, my grandmother was Protestant, and her family threatened to disown her when they were going to get married, and they got married anyway, and her family didn't speak to her for many years, and they eventually came around and they were able to move forward. But, you know, their blind spot was around race. They were able to transcend these other kind of socialized cultural norms that were divisive. And for me, I wonder what that is in my generation. You know, especially now we talk a lot about the intersections of race and of gender and of sexuality, and those are things, especially the kind of forefront of gender and understanding some of the ways that we've been taught to think only A and B, and in very simple terms, have been things that I've been kind of challenging myself to learn more about and be more open to, so that my grandparents, you know, or grandkids aren't writing pieces about their grandpa about, you know, how he was so closed-minded and he didn't do this. I'm sure they'll find plenty of mistakes and faults, but I'm gonna try my best to pass along as much love and open-mindedness as I can. So I hope that's what my contribution to a transformative experience for humanity can be.
That's a beautiful answer. We've got a question from someone who wants to know, when you're performing Temples, is there a section of it that you particularly get excited about and love to dig into as a performer?
Yeah, there's a couple. There's all the music parts are fun. You know, this one was really great too, because you'll see we have a special guest, a friend of mine, who beatboxes during the show. Not to give anything away, and I rap over the beatbox. And that was always really exciting to get to collaborate with Brenton and share space with someone else. I think there's also a piece where I'm playing a few different characters of like kids I grew up with, and it always kind of pulls them back into that room. So those are definitely two of the spaces that I get really excited about.
Oh, there. We have a question asking, how is living in LA and that atmosphere, how has that impacted your work?
Well, like I said, it's been interesting. You know, since I moved out there, I've been mostly not there. But luckily, when I am there, you know, I don't have a community like I have here. That's one thing that I miss. And being kind of bi-coastal and getting to come back, obviously before the pandemic, every month or two really helped with that. But my best friend, fellow sacrificial poet, touring partner, G Yamazawa, who's also a poet and hip hop artist. He lives out there. He moved out to the year after me. So we're out there. One of my good friends, Armin, who's a producer, who's from Durham as well. He's out there, music producer. So that has helped me a lot in trying to, you know, almost strengthen those home relationships out there. But it's also really challenged me to step outside the comfort zone of always being able to lean on my mentors and my community members to be able to go to a show and get an inspiration, like having to find that myself and to read and watch and go out into the world has been a new challenge. So I think in that way, you know, it's had that impact on my work. It's really made me sit down and go inward and hone in.
But I'm curious, like, who the artists working right now, whether they're fiction writers or music writers or anything else, like who you've been watching and listening to right now?
Oh man, so many different ones. There's a guy who's a really great, he started out as a poet and then he decided to try his hand at young adults books. And he won, I think, a Newbery Award, a Caldecott honor. And then he was Jason Reynolds. He wrote the book about Miles Morales, which was the Spider-Man, the Afro-Latino Spider-Man that ended up being, they made the movie, the most recent Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse off of. His work is really unique to me because I was reading his young adult books where it's literally poetry. It's novel form, but it's very poetic. And there are times when there's one word on the page, and there's times where it's a whole page of prose, and there's times where it's just a couple verses, and there's a time where a whole page is a question mark made out of words. And it just, like, I love artists who are bending the rules of genre and, again, like blurring those lines. And so that has been a big one. Tayimba Jess is another one that won the Pulitzer last year for Olio, I've been reading. So, but I like a lot of historical fiction too, and a lot of just nonfiction. I love reading about history. That really inspires me a lot to know how it is we got to where we are, and then creatively responding to that really affects my work a lot. So
Yeah. Huh. So here's a big question for you. What do you see as the future of live performance?
Woo! I don't know. I hope that I generally hope and believe that there is another side to this, and we will get back into spaces where we can feel the body heat and we can smell the breath and we can really share space with each other. So I think that is going to be there. But I think that in the meantime, there is something to all of this. You know, I recently got to run a program with some of the artists I met in Peru, run a virtual follow-on eight session workshop series last month with 50 young hip hop artists of different genres in Peru and 4 American artists from all over. And it was cool because we were like, man, this is really the pits. Like, we got to be all in our homes and doing this. And when we were just in Peru with y'all, but at the same time, it was like, yo, but all 50 of you are all scattered between different parts of the US and Peru. And we are in the same room creating and building and being able to say, hey, how's everything going? Well, actually this week, you know, my aunt got sick, or I'm having this issue with my job. And wow, it feels so good to just take a break and create with someone and be able to speak. And so I think in that way, when we were even performing together in that small sense of having what we call a cipher in hip hop, which they'll find out in the show, a circle of people kind of sharing poems or raps or beatbox, whatever. It was like, wow, just the feeling of getting to connect with folks so far away. I wonder if maybe we have the opportunity to take advantage of some of those opportunities more now, since we can't be with folks locally in a space together. So that's my hope for it. And I think, you know, I think the technology is going to evolve. We're going to be able to do a whole lot more in a few more months. I think there's probably teams of folks sitting in rooms right now building out like the next iteration of Zoom that's going to let us do,
I was going to say,
really creative stuff. So
these Zoom boxes will will
Yeah.
become
They'll
just
adapt.
creative spaces in there. I have another big question for you, which is, what gives you hope?
I think people's resiliency. Yeah, I think people's resiliency. I mean, there's a lot of, I'd be lying if I said I've been hopeful this last 7 months as my like dominant emotion. I think it's been really tough in this moment, both because of the pandemic and just the state of the nation and the state of the world. But yeah, just seeing like beautiful moments, unexpected moments in the interactions that I've had with people, people creating beautiful art, people finding ways to connect with each other again across those distances. That gives me hope that it's like, being in a long distance relationship and that feeling of if you have an end date and you finally get to see, your family member or your loved one or your significant other again, that feeling is almost heightened, just like, wow, I feel like we're just meeting again for the first time. And I think I'm hoping that both in this performing arts world and just in our human interactions, I hope that when the time comes, we're able to do that freely again. We're going to really not take it for granted. We're going to be like, wow, this is just the most, amazing feeling. So I'm hoping for that.
I'm hoping for that too. I hope we take advantage and find ourselves forward in a new place.
Absolutely.
From there. What do you hope? Okay, and this, looking at the time, I'm like, this may have to be the last question. So if anyone has any last pressing question for the amazing Kane Smego, let me know. But when people watch Temples, what is it that you hope as an artist is happening as someone watches it?
I hope that they feel challenged. Honestly, I hope that they feel as challenged as it was for me to write it and to confront some of these things that I realized were part of me. I think that's what I hope folks can take from it, is that I had a pretty unique upbringing and experience that was quite different from a lot of young people that look like me in America, but that still didn't make me immune to having socialized and learned some of the negative things and not learn some of the things that were left out. And so the show was really like a reckoning with that, and to figure out how I can, move forward. And I think identifying some of those areas is the first step to unlearning and relearning and deciding who it is we really want to be. So I hope that folks feel challenged and can pause for a moment and really just like sit in that feeling of challenge and accept it. And and remember that there's a lot of folks who are challenged every day and don't have a choice whether to sit in it or not. So that's my hope, that it can open up some conversations too. I mean, the show, you already know what the show is about. The conversations I've seen that have been possible in some of the most unlikely of spaces. So, yeah.
Well, I'm going to say this, that I think your show is so relevant because of that reckoning, which so many of us are in the midst of right now. So many individuals, so many organizations, so many institutions, the levels on which our reckoning is happening. But I want to say that in the midst of all that reckoning is just incredible art, power, and entertainment as well. And for me, when those two things can meet together, then the opening for change, the invitation for change is there. And that's what I love about your work so much. And I'm so proud that PlayMakers gets to present Temples again for these weeks, and thankful to Street Signs for making that possible, and really just also incredibly excited to see what you do next and keep doing. And thank you for all that you are already doing to create change. So
my pleasure. Thank you so much for giving me some time and sharing the work. I hope folks really connect with it, and
I hope people will come back, because you'll be live again in person on October 11th. So watch the show
with some
again,
friends too,
and then come back October 11th. Kane, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. Take care. Peace. Bye, Viv. Bye, everybody.
And to you, our audience, if you haven't seen our other episodes of Virtually Viv, you can find them all on PlayMakers YouTube channel, along with other PlayMakers Keeping You Company content available for you to enjoy right from your home. Liz will drop a link in the chat for that. But the last thing I'll say is, like every arts organization and so many people right now, it's the struggle is real. And if you are able to make a contribution and a tax-deductible donation, every gift, big or small, is so appreciated and necessary. And of course, one of the best ways you can support us also is by getting a PlayMakers pass this year and watching all of our content. And I look forward to sharing many more, I can't speak anymore. It's Friday night. Many more Virtually Viv experiences with you, and many other great theatrical moments in the months ahead. Have a wonderful weekend, everyone. Thank you, Kane. Thank you to the team who helps me do this. Good night, everyone.